some of those challenges that you described. And Jesse has been recruited to be the scribe this evening. So I'm going to call on people, or you're going to volunteer, and I'm going to have him write down a few of those challenges that you identified in your conversation. So Jesse got 3 colored pens. You want to write big so people can read it. All right, so who's willing to share a challenge? All right, right here.
I'm guessing I have the number 1 answer, email.
Email, okay, just email. All right, okay, Jackie.
Interruptions.
Interruptions, oh, that's a powerful one. All right. Okay, another one. Oh, there gotta be more than 2. Okay.
I'm an artist chasing the muse.
Ah, okay.
Chasing the muse.
The muse. All right. I love how big he's writing. That's great. Okay, right here.
So I'm in meetings all the time, which create more work for me, and I don't never feel like I'm getting anything done. So I'm creating more work for myself in meetings.
So the meetings. All right.
I have one, emotional attachment.
Okay. Sounds like you're not alone. And I think we've got room for maybe 2 more. Anybody else? Ah, yes.
Phone calls.
Phone calls. Okay. We got emails, phone calls. Part of the work, but take no time. Elisa?
I would say substance versus process. Sometimes get wrapped up in organizational process and reporting and all those things versus the actual substance of
What
the
you need to
purpose
get
of
done.
what I'm doing.
She wants to say process then?
Process
Bullets?
versus substance. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to keep that list up there. And Jesse's off the hook for the first part of the presentation this evening, so you can take your seat again. That wasn't too terrible, was it?
I think I survived.
You handled that. Okay, so now we're going to start on the second part of the presentation, which is talking about small steps, why they were, how they can help you manage your time. But I want to start with a story. And this is the story of Julie. Julie is a single parent. She has 2 children. She works full-time. She's overweight and depressed. And she's at risk for diabetes and hypertension. Now, she has gone to the UCLA Medical Clinic, which is in Southern California. She's gone in maybe 3 or 4 times. And you can imagine what they've recommended. Exercise. Julie, you need to be exercising 4 or 5 times a week. Vigorous exercise. And you can imagine a response. Yeah, like, right, where am I going to find the time between working full-time and having 2 kids? And so she's never followed through. But she's back at the clinic for another visit. And this time, something's going to happen that changes her life. So stay tuned. So now I want to introduce you to the concept of Kaizen. Has anybody ever heard that word before? Kaizen. Actually, Kaizen comes from 2 Japanese words, meaning Kai is change, Zen means toward good. But I want to give you the background on it. At the beginning of World War II, there was a gentleman who was a statistician by the name of W. Edwards Deming. Anybody ever heard of him? Okay. And he introduced a concept that really was about small steps, and sometimes it's gone by the name of continuous quality improvement. And he introduced that to American manufacturers to help them ramp up their manufacturing capacity. And they were obviously successful, victorious in World War II. Now the irony of this is that after World War II, General Douglas MacArthur invited Dr. Deming to come to Japan to help Japan rebuild its business and industry. And the Japanese absolutely ran with this concept of small steps. They became highly successful from having been just devastated. And the world was, kind of puzzled. What's going on there? And there really wasn't a lot of information coming out. And it wasn't until, I think it was 1986, there was a book that was published, we just checked the name here, it's called Kaizen, The Key to Japan's Competitive Success. And it was written by a gentleman whose name is Masaki Imai. And in that book, he talked about this whole concept of basically small steps. Okay, now we're going to fast forward a little bit. 2004, there's a psychologist just happens to be at the UCLA Medical Center clinic where Julie was making her appearance. And in 2004, he published a book called One Small Step Can Change Your Life. Now, there were two very unique things about this book that differed from what the world had known about Kaizen, or small steps. He introduced the idea of Kaizen and small steps to people in their individual lives. Not big businesses, not big manufacturing or small manufacturing, it was to individuals. And the other thing he did in that book was explain what's going on in our brain, why small steps can be so powerful. Okay, so we're gonna take you back to, no, not quite yet, to Julie. He said, Dr. Maurer says that there's two ways that we make change. One is known in Japanese as kakushin, and if you speak Japanese, I apologize for probably slaughtering that pronunciation. Kakushin is innovation. It's dramatic changes, like somebody might have gone on a crash diet to be able to get into something to wear some special event, or it's the dramatic layoffs that we've seen around the world for the last 4 to 5 years. But what's interesting and actually rather sad is that many times, in fact, most of the times, these really dramatic kind of changes don't stick. They don't create the lasting effects that we want. So the other kind of change, contrast to innovation or kakushin, is Kaizen, small steps. And Dr. Maurer explains that the reason Kaizen works is because it disarms our brain's fear response. Okay, so now what does that mean? Disarms our brain's fear response. Deep in our brain, in our area called the midbrain, there's a very tiny structure called the amygdala. Anyone heard of the amygdala before? It's getting a lot of attention these days. Well, the amygdala has been absolutely critical for our survival as a species because it is what controls our fight or flight response. You know, in the days when we were living on the plains or the savannas and we were at risk for predators attacking us or our family, you know, we needed to be hypervigilant. That amygdala really needed to be on full alert. But what happens is that amygdala can get triggered now, even though that's not how we live, whenever we try to make a change. So what Dr. Maurer says is that when we take a small step, we're able to circumvent the amygdala. Now what happens when the amygdala gets triggered and we go into a fight or flight response? It shuts, our brain loses access to our cortex, specifically this area up here. It's called the prefrontal cortex. Sometimes you hear it's the area where our executive function resides. That means it's about planning, making decisions. Well, when we go into that fight or flight response, we're not working here because we're in a survival mode. But the beauty of the small steps of Kaizen is they bypass the amygdala. And in doing so, it allows our brain to start laying down new pathways, new neural pathways that ultimately can lead to new routines and new habits. Dr. Maurer refers to this as like a stealth solution because it's, again, sneaking around the amygdala quietly. So let's go back to Julie now. She's at the UCLA Medical Center clinic, and Dr. Maurer happens to be in the room with Julie as well as with the resident. And Dr. Maurer's looked over her chart, and he's seen that she's been in, 3 or 4 times. They've always made that recommendation. She needs to be exercising. She's never followed through. And he knows exactly the resident is going to say the same thing she's heard many times. So before the resident can talk, Dr. Maurer says, Julie, before you turn the television on in the evening, and that was one outlet she allowed herself, 30 minutes, usually not much more, of television. That was the one outlet she had. So he said, Julie, before you turn the television on in the evening, could you walk in place for 1 minute? 1 minute. And she said, well, yeah, I think I can do that. Well, that's the thing I want you to think of when you choose your small step this evening is, yeah, I think I could do that. Okay, hold on, Julie. We're going to continue now with more about Kaizen, small steps. Dr. Maurer gives a really fascinating definition of small steps. He says, the step is so small that you are as sure you can do it as you are that the sun will rise tomorrow. That's how sure you are. The sun is going to rise tomorrow. Now, because I mostly do this presentation in the Northwest, I always add, it's not about seeing the sun. It's about knowing that it actually is coming up even though we don't see it. That's how certain you need to be when you choose a small step, that you know you absolutely can do it. Now I want to share with you an analogy about how we form habits. Imagine that there's a forest, and we've got some great forests left in Oregon, and you want to create a path